Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Valdez. I'm the one of the co-founders of the Business Transition Council and also current president. Today we have our 3 time a year educational symposium, and as you're looking at the screen, you have Dr. Klura, Pete Jordan, and Denise Clemens. And we're going to start with this. I would ask everyone to go ahead and mute themselves if you're not a speaker, and also make sure you turn off your cell phones. Our format today, we're going to start with a brief introduction of everyone, so you get a chance to learn a little bit about who our panelists are. We're then going to jump into our questions, and then we'll wrap up right around 8:55 and give our panelists a chance with any parting comments they have with us. Once we finish that, we'll close our recording, and we'll stay on the line for some social chat for anybody who wants to have any further conversation about this. I understand if you have another appointment at 9 o'clock and you need to move on, that'll be fine, not a problem. But we'll go ahead and jump right in here. But before we do, a little bit of history about why we had the BTC. The Business Transition Council was kind of birthed in 2005 and became formalized in 2008. We've been meeting every Tuesday since, talking about succession, exit, and transition counseling. And we're a learning organization and a non-for-profit. And our mission really is to dare to share. We're entrepreneurs teaching other entrepreneurs and helping each other, and becoming better at this subject as we work with clients. So with that, I want to go ahead and ask my 3 panelists to go ahead and give us a brief 30-second to a minute introduction of them, what their current role is, and what they're working on. Dr. Klura.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. Good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Super excited about this discussion. Lots of bases to cover, and it's a privilege to be with such incredible professionals and sharing this conversation. So my name is Dr. Gino Klura. I'm the president of Ultraviolet Living. We are a skilled in-home nursing company where we provide nursing care for ultra high net worth families across the country. In addition to that, I am the author of a book called 7 Layers of Successful Relationships and a board member of CEO Effectiveness, which is spearheaded by Dr. Bill Anton, who is in the audience today. So that is the tidbit. Very excited to dive in.
Thank you, Peter.
And my name is Pete Jordan. I'm currently the CFO for RCH Capital. We're I'd say a small manager and sponsor of commercial mortgage funds. We buy commercial mortgages on the secondary market. We service them, work them out. My background, CPA by training, spent all my professional career here in the Tampa Bay area. With one of the big international accounting firms, and then a broker-dealer for 10 years, home builder, and even early on in my career in hospital settings. I've got a diverse background, all in the accounting and financial arena.
All right, thank you, Pete. Denise?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Denise Clemens. I'm also known as the SBA Queen. I am a designated CCIM. I am a national small business administration lender. It's the only type of loan I do. I work with a lender or a bank that has a specialized department only servicing small business administration loans throughout the country.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And hopefully everyone, if they want to learn more about any one of our panelists today, if you go to www.btctampa.com, you will find our website and you will find information about all our speakers, and you're free to reach out to them. Our title or our topic today is Yikes, the cost of capital has doubled. What do I do now? So with a title like that, I'm sure we're going to have some lively discussion. I'd like to start with a question that may not be obvious to everyone, but I think it's really, really important to start with kind of where we come from this as entrepreneurs and business owners in this environment. For most people running businesses today, they were not active running businesses in the 70s. And that's really the last time we saw this kind of change in an environment that really kind of disrupted things in a way that really kind of everything went topsy-turvy. So with that, let me ask a question. We'll see who's interested in starting with this one. It says, as a business owner, what part of my mental model needs to adjust because of inflation pressures? We'll start with a general question on what does it take from where you are sitting emotionally, mentally, psychologically as you move forward in 2023?
So Michael, I'll take a first stab at that if everyone's okay with that. So, when we start breaking down and understanding how it is that mental models work, right? And the conditioning process based off of decisions that are made every single day that are habitual, right? There's a framing that takes place. There's a certain perception and perspective of the world that each of us carries that is reflected in those models themselves, right? So then it really is a question of, are you open possibilities of what could be, right? And that is not a quote of mine, that is taken from my esteemed colleague, Dr. Bill Anton, right? What are the possibilities that exist for how you currently think about something? And can you think about it differently, right? Adaptability. Can you adapt to changing times to be more efficient, more productive, perhaps identify a better way of doing something, right? And that is never an easy thing because change is difficult. Change is not easy, right? And so changing the mindset is probably the most difficult thing any of us could do. It's easy to change our diet. It's easy to change our physical workout habits, but our decision-making capacity is a very different story. So when we start talking about being in the entrepreneur seat, the owner seat as well, and feeling that pressure, right? We have to understand why that pressure is there in the first place and how does that affect the benefit of the benefit on the other side of what we're doing with the company itself. So, I think a really good thing for folks to do and to kind of put into perspective is to take a step back and seek to be as objective as possible in the way in which they are operating their company, right? There's many ways to cut a pie. There's many ways to eat a pie. Are you open to the possibilities of a different approach where you can actually embrace those pressures, optimize, leverage those pressures instead of making it a negative experience, right? And it sounds very primary and remedial, but it's difficult. It's not easy to do because, hey, look, if I've done it this way for the past 15 years and it's worked, why would I do it any differently, right? Well, times change, variables change, and there's certain principles that make sense to follow. But at the same time, the variables that are involved, we're in a very unique time economically, right? From a globalization perspective, we are more interconnected now than we have ever been in the history of humanity, right? So that shifts things, right? The dependency on each other and economic well-being and robustness are very important things to consider. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Good. Thank you. And I think you hit a real point, is that the environment has shifted, and we know how human nature works. People tend to keep doing what they were just doing, and they think that's what's happened. And of course, we went from an environment where money was easy, it was inexpensive, and some would argue that it was free based on where inflation was, and now we're in a different environment.
Yes.
One of the questions that has come in is about evaluations. And in terms of valuations, how has the current environment affected the valuations of companies? And as a second part of that, if you were going out to a lender, how would inflation, the cost of capital rising, affect your valuation? Anybody like to talk to that or speak to that?
Michael, as a lender, all lending is based on the 5 C's of credit. And when you're dealing with SBA, Small Business Administration, we're primarily a cash flow lender. And when you have an increase in rate and the cost of capital, it does ultimately affect the overall cash flow. So if your model is based off of the interest rates that were, the lowest interest rates during COVID and COVID recovery, it doesn't necessarily work anymore. So therefore, the business owner needs to readjust their thought process to understanding what it looks like today to borrow. Does that lead over and bleed into valuations? Absolutely. As a nationwide lender, I'm seeing commercial real estate come in low. Equipment is equipment, but rents have altered. Therefore, it's going to bleed down into the ultimate valuation of the building. Because if in the end, it's not just valuation, but can you afford it? It's all affordability. And on the business side, it definitely parlays, because some individuals, if you've got a manufacturing company and you're relying on a a line of some sort to be able to manage your inventory, the cost of that line has just gone up. And therefore, it's going to bleed over to the profitability, which ultimately is the valuation of the goodwill of that company. So it ultimately is affecting it in every way.
I'll jump in and add, I mean, I absolutely agree with what Gino was saying. That this is the time as an owner, as any C-level executive, you cannot put your head in the sand, and nor would I think any of them are. But do you know what your cost of capital is now? Do you know what the impact is going to be on your debt service coverage ratios? Just if you haven't looked at those things, I'd be surprised. But if you haven't, shame on you. You need to look at those things and understand that the go forward metrics are different, and you can't keep doing the same thing. As Gino said, sometimes it's human nature to want to keep doing what you've been doing, and things will get better, and hope will win the day. I would say this is a point in time where you really do need to focus, or get someone else to help you focus on what it means that your cost of capital has doubled. You have $1 million credit line, and say your rate's gone up over 4 or 5% in 1 year. That's at least one person if you're a small business. Do you deal with that through labor cost, either headcount or wage adjustments? Do you look at it in terms of how can you change your supply costs, looking at your supply chain? Are there things you could do with your banker, Denise? Certainly you want to have a good relationship with your banker. And in a time like this, make sure you're talking to them. If you have maturities coming up, clearly you need to be getting in front of that, because whatever rate you did have, especially if it was fixed, is likely going to be shockingly higher when you come to renew. If you can consolidate loans, maybe look at doing that. And certainly the easy thing, if you do have excess cash and it's sitting around, and you've got a good friendly banker you've been with for a long time, but maybe they're not paying competitive rate, you deserve a better rate. And you should ask the question of your banker is, how can this money earn a little bit more if it's excess cash sitting in checking account? But I'll let the other panelists chime in then. But both points from Gino and Denise are right on, and it is a point in time where we've got to be thinking about doing things differently, making adjustments, and facilitating change.
Thank you, Pete. Anyone else want to say anything about that? If not, I'll move on to another question that's come up.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. Now, one of the things that happened in the past is that it was easier to get access to capital. Banks were friendlier, if you would use that word as to describe the relationship with your banker, but they were more open to trying to loan money. And of course, sometimes you would, how much can I get? And you want to take as much as you can get. But things have changed now. How does the entrepreneur or business owner, what's the process they should be thinking about to help them determine how much do they actually need? Because the cost of capital is going to be far more expensive. What they should they be doing to help determine what their need is, and to help project what that need may be over a period of time? Anyone?
Well, Michael, I think that I get a lot of clients that come to me and they're like, well, how much do I need? You don't ask a bank how much you need. You really need to come to me with an idea of what you do need, where you're going to use it, how it's going to be utilized. Is that going to help you survive, or is that actually going to help you grow? that's where looking at a part-time CFO, your CPA, um, making those consultation appointments to determine that information. And back to that whole, it was mentioned a fixed rate. If you fixed a rate in the past 3 years, do not wait for 2 to 3 more years to start looking at what that rate's going to adjust to. Look at it today, because it will not be 3.25% to 4%. Even in 5 years, it's not going to be that. That was an all-time fluke low. And enjoy the 5 years while you have it, but you've got to prepare for what's coming up. And it's difficult right now. CPAs are, like everybody else, underwater, very busy. But it is, as a business owner, you need to press to make sure that you're getting an appointment consultatively to figure out your game plan, to get where you want to go in the future. And it's so difficult because there's so many changing variables. But a lot of borrowers that come to me right now are coming with multiple models. This is the best case scenario, this is the worst case scenario, and they're making models that they can shift and look at different considerations in the marketplace, because it's not just the cost of capital to borrow, it's the cost of insurance, it's the cost of maintenance, whether it's equipment or whatever it might be. All of it's going up, all of it's been considered. You look at restaurants, all the to-go boxes have doubled across the board. So how do you compensate for that? Will it go down? Not likely. Shipping's not going down. Insurance isn't going down. Electricity isn't going down. They've got to start making those models with their hopeful tool belt, which includes a good CPA and CFO.
Great. I think that's a great point, Denise, in that obviously as a company gets larger, they have a full-time CFO on the team as part of what they're doing. But in the case where they haven't reached the size where they have a full-time CFO, having an interim CFO, I think, is a great investment, because right now they should be paying dividends in terms of what they're able to help you do to survive in terms of accessing markets, getting capital, and understanding exactly what all the parameters need to be to go ahead and go forward. And like you were saying, if you want to grow, you don't show up at the banker going, well, how much will you give me? You have to have a strategy, a plan, and it has to be documented. Anybody else want to touch that before I go to another question?
Michael, so, I think something really interesting that you said, Denise, and is so important. I think it's one of those things that every entrepreneur and business owner needs to hear, is the difference between surviving and growing, and how that truly influences the planning side, right? Because so many folks out the gate are used to bootstrapping, right? Like, how can we maximize as much value as possible, right? Without having to dish out, right, a lot of dollars out the door. And there's such a shift in perspective when it's like, okay, we can survive where we are at right now, but there's no way we are going to get the assets, the resources, the field, the touch points that we are going to need to really exponentiate this model to hit the projections that we have lined up for us. I will tell you, in my neck of the woods, we are going through this process right now. We just hired a fractional CFO, and I will tell you, the value that young man has delivered in the past 7 weeks has been amazing and incredible, right? And then it goes back to the idea of, well, no, between myself and my executive team, we can figure it out. If it's not your expertise, if it's not your wheelhouse, you got to bring the right people in, right? And I think that is a very important thing. Even if you don't have the means to bring in a full-time CFO, a fractional CFO is an incredible investment. Highly recommend.
When I think looking at different avenues, a lot of people want to grow based on borrowing money and growing. And I'm seeing now where maybe they're growing via a business acquisition. There are different options. I always parlay it to getting pregnant. Everybody wants to do it the good old-fashioned way, but it doesn't always happen that way.
Sure.
Sometimes you need to look at adopting another child, fostering a different, partnering with another company, buying another company.
You broke up right there, Denise. If you could repeat that.
I'm sorry. You have to look at getting to the end point in different options. It could be partnering, it could be buying another company. It doesn't always have to happen organically. And looking at those options, there's a lot of good business acquisitions out there that are available where you might not have to bootstrap it to grow. You could buy something and grow.
Absolutely.
So there,
And
I'm gonna
that-
jump in.
that CFO would help you look at different options.
Yeah, and that's a great point as we talk about succession, exit, and transition. All of these are things that you don't wake up one day and decide that you're doing. You start with a process and you work through that process with a group of professionals around you. And one of the things we're talking about is if you're using your own money, I want to ask the question a little differently. How do people behave when they're using their own money as compared to when they're using someone else's money when they've borrowed it? What is the dynamic that goes on with that CEO and their team when it's capital that they have access to because, quote, it's theirs, as compared to going to a process where they're going to someone else to acquire that capital?
I'll jump in there because obviously we are in the business of raising capital from investors and putting that money to work. And we also leverage, those investments with bank loans. Hopefully, and I would say in our case, we want to certainly provide the investor with a fair and hopefully better than fair return. And so we have a feeling of a fiduciary responsibility to use their money wisely. I do want to loop back to the topic that Denise was just talking about in terms of and surviving and being able to take advantage. Here's a silver lining for everyone fretting about, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. If you can survive, and as you go through that process of looking at things, you'll probably become a better company. Looking at your costs, looking at the way you do things, your workload and processes. As you look at all those things, you'll be a better company. And at the end of this cycle, I'll call it, the pendulum always swings, and the pendulum's going to keep swinging. There will be opportunities. There'll be acquisition opportunities, as Denise pointed out. In our case, we're hoping that there will be some cracks in the commercial real estate loan market that allow us to buy those loans at highly discounted rates. And when the market comes back, we'll be able to make a handsome profit on those. But the point, I guess, that I was taking away from listening to all that is, if you can focus on your business, make sure that you survive, work with experts that can help you. At the end of the day, you'll be well positioned to take advantage of some opportunities. You don't have to necessarily be exploding and growing and becoming the big machine that you want to be in this moment. I think this is let's make sure we survive and get through this moment and be ready for those opportunities, because they'll be out there.
Well, another question has popped up and come in that really kind of ties to all of this and kind of the expertise that is sitting with us now. Entrepreneurs want to go, so they want to grow, but sometimes retreating and looking in the mirror, not only personally of who you are for self-development and growth, you have to do that with your company. And one of the points of introspection that I know there's expertise inside our group that work with business owners on this specific conversation and subject is, what is the profile of the C-suite and the CEO and their personal relationship with money? And how does that profile of who they are and what money means to them, going all the way back to early conversations, pre-language and their mental models, and how they work with money, how is that dynamic going to either be a huge plus or a big blinking red light as they go through there's a symbol for opportunity and change and things being different. How does that all kind of come together in this time when there's volatility, which means there's real opportunity? Anyone want to touch on that or talk about that?
So, I think one of the things from my vantage point, Michael, that, when I take a look at the relationship that business owners and CEOs have with money, and to your point, it does absolutely, from a symbolic nature, go way back to childhood, right? And then kind of their experience with haves versus have-nots, and how it is that they essentially determine the value of the resource that is money. It's always a fine balance, right, between how much risk is acceptable, right, versus not acceptable. And when you take a look at managing dollars that are coming in, how you exponentiate the impact that those dollars can have, and how do you palpitate that risk? Like, is it really truly worth what that is? And if you are not at a place, I think from a mental perspective and an outlook in general of saying, look, we have the bare bones necessities of what it is that we need, right, to actually operate day in and day out. We also understand that, look, it's a frontier out there. And if you're not willing to put resources to explore, right, what those possibilities, right, should be and could be for your company, you have to do a lot of self-reflection. This game is not for the faint of heart, right? You have to 110% be willing to take the risk, which means that there is a massive emotional connection to what is going on and how it is that you can navigate from a self-regulation perspective. What are you doing to keep yourself in check and have a very healthy understanding of the checks and balances that are needed to appropriately and healthily grow a business, and at the same time ensure that you, as the owner and leader, are fulfilled? Because if you start having discrepancies, if you start having challenges and issues where you are not fulfilled and you start doing things out of desperation, it gets dangerous. It gets very, very dangerous. And it's definitely something that you have to keep an eye on. That is why surrounding yourself with people who are much smarter in that world and that lane and more calculated is such an important thing.
You talk about that, and I think we talked about the interim CFO. Are there any other people that a C-suite team, the CEO, should consider surrounding themselves that aren't necessarily what we would consider part of the hard science group, that may be part of the soft science group, in terms of keeping, you said that you used the word, I think, modulate oneself. So who else should be considered as part of this team, maybe on an interim basis, to help the business owner? Because in inflation and the cost of capital and the stress is just one part, and it becomes kind of the pointy stick. But what it does is it opens up all these other needs. So yes. Could you speak to that for a second? And
absolutely,
I'm interested also in hearing from Pete's standpoint and Denise's standpoint a little bit about what your comment is, because it's kind of outside of the world that they work in and what their thoughts may be.
So, one of the things there, Michael, so what is the power team in my wheelhouse, right, as far as being able to collectively and strategically push forward positive results? So number one, on the soft skills, you need to have someone who is very well versed in clinical psychology, right? And a lot of people think that's kind of left field, right? But at the end of the day, I don't care what business model that you are in, right? What it is that you are doing, you are dealing with people, right? And so your ability to optimize that interaction is incredibly important, right? I mean, there's the three tenets of anyone being able to optimize performance: physical, mental, social. Well, on the social side of it, right, there's a direct connection to the mental, and the mental will often influence the physical, and back and forth, right? So you got to have someone who's very good at understanding the human condition, right? And whether it's a clinical psychologist or someone in IO psychology, even anthropology, if there's niches and specialties there, but you need to have someone in the social sciences that is an expert in their field and can navigate the waters of business, right? And that is a different skill set, I will say, right? There's specific folks in that wheelhouse that are very good at doing that. The second person that you need to have in that realm outside of your fractional CFO is obviously a good accountant, right? I know that's more on the hard side, but you have to have an incredible accountant as part of your team. You need to have a good wealth manager and advisor. Because look, there's a lot of opportunities that are out there that may not fall in line necessarily with what a CPA is saying. And so being able to talk to someone who is very well versed and what to do, like working with the end in mind. All right. So you're going to exit your business, right? What does that conversation look like, right? If it's a 5-year goal for me and I'm working backwards, what are the opportunities? What can I start doing now for a successful exit? And there are wealth managers and advisors that specialize in that. So you want their feedback to make sure that you're achieving efficiency and every step that you make to optimize the sale of that company or whatever the long-term plan is, right? So wealth advisor, an appropriate accountant, fractional CFO, and someone that is involved in clinical psychology and specializes in that.
No, that's a very interesting take. I really like that that perspective. Pete, Denise, Dee, any comments on this and how it relates to you? Really, kind of coming from the quote, the financial side.
Yeah, as a very small organization, we don't probably have the we haven't taken advantage of those types of people. I would say my takeaway from what you just said, Gino, is networking, 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 and that's part of what this group is all about. But you probably don't even know all the questions. Well, I'm sure you don't know all the questions that you should or could be asking. And by surrounding yourself with other professionals in different fields, you may find some of those questions. And as it relates to your inner self, which is what Gino and I know Bill and Tom talk about quite a bit. Talking to other people, asking questions, just being around other folks, professional or not, is how you help develop your own self-awareness, which is critical and something we talk about a lot in this group. And I think that's what I'm taking away. I also realize that by not, focusing on that as a small organization here, perhaps, we are missing out a little bit on, an element of what might make us even more successful as a group. And I'll take away that from our discussion today, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Denise, you're sitting there evaluating a lot of things. You're looking at collateral, you're looking at cash flow. Does it ever, and you're looking at, credit score. I mean, there's a whole series of things that you look at as an SBA lender in your process. How does the depth with breadth of the C-suite or any of these other pieces, does that influence you a little bit, a lot, not at all? Give us a little bit on your perception of what this conversation is that we just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, as a lender, we're evaluating so many different aspects of a deal. When you're talking about a business acquisition, especially larger, have you engaged somebody to do a quality of earnings report? Are you doing that on your own? Are you looking outwards? Are you hiring the correct professionals that know exactly what they're looking at and can give you a validated report? Financials, people that I just had a client come to me with April financials of last year. This was yesterday. And
Right.
April, we're, 9 months old. This is not acceptable. Looking at reality expectations from a borrower. The person that says, I'm going to hire 35 people. Where? Because I don't know anybody else that can hire them. So show me where this job market's coming from. And now with all that, do your projections where I'll just change them. Doesn't work that way. So we're, and as a lender, we have the RMA books and, the resources to double check what the standards are in an industry, turn time, employment, etc. We know what has happened to insurance. It's happened to us. We know what's happened to payroll. It's happened to us. We know that your attorney is not going to get back to you in 2 days because ours doesn't either. So it's looking at the reality and where the person's mindset is. And there are a lot of times where I'm like, you really need to go out and seek additional advice, especially when it comes to commercial real estate. Most commercial real estate comes with the construction component. Right now, it's still hard for me to swallow. Construction's running about 350, 380 a square foot ground up. That's very expensive. Some industries are choking on that. Assisted living, daycare, those industries where, the revenue line is sort of stagnant. It can't increase but so much. It's going to parlay into those industries. So have they accepted that? And are they looking at the reality of that, or are they not? Because business is very different today than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago.
Denise, thanks for weighing in with those pieces. And a couple of questions come up. And as we look at this, what we kind of described, Gino had talked a little bit about, is really kind of an advisory board that the C-suite kind of works with. And, larger companies have boards and advisory boards. And of course, the smaller organizations can look to those people on an ad hoc basis, and maybe even within their peer group, they have those that they can work with. I know a management consultant who's not the financial or accounting expert may be someone that we haven't mentioned yet. We don't want to not bring that person in. The key is to bring different viewpoints to what we're doing and helping build that. When we have crisis, the value of that group becomes more important as compared to when all tides are rising. So I'm going to throw a little bit of a piece in here, and let's see kind of where this goes with this discussion. But in the news recently, and I'm not asking for people's political opinion, but we do have the debt limit coming up, and there's lots of discussion on any of the channels that you look at about the debt limit and what that means. I tend to not get as personally excited about this, as I have faith that people will find ways to work things out and cooperate. Again, that could be part of my mental model. I know that not everyone feels that way. And of course, eyes on the TV screen are what networks go for. So it's a big discussion item. Anyone here want to talk about what may or may not happen with the debt limit, how it may impact what we're doing? Could it in fact affect the rates that these small to mid-sized businesses are going to have to pay for? And before I change the topic just a little bit more, give me some of your thoughts about this whole concept in the news in the last 48 hours about debt limits.
Michael, I'm going to leave my personal views of it out, but luckily the Small Business Administration program has been funded by the United States government since the 53 when it was created. Will it affect us? Only in the fashion of the interest rate changing. I don't see any administration that would ever demolish the United States Small Business Administration. So for us, we just go about it and hopefully look at every deal on its own merit in an aspect to approve or decline.
Thank you, Pete.
Yes, my take on it is any sort of uncertainty is, dangerous, creates volatility. Business owners want certainty to be able to plan. Circling back to the beginning of our discussion today, this is an uncertain time for sure. And to focus on being able to survive these times and come out when the sun shines again, I think is critical. Michael, I probably will jump in your camp that, at some point cooler heads prevail and they'll resolve this. But the drama that we have to go through certainly creates an uncertainty and therefore probably volatility. which is not good for business. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
And it's all media driven.
I agree that it's a story that will get people to look at the channel and sit there and watch. And of course, we get advertising sold when people are watching. But Gino, you come at this from a little different angle, I know. Do you have any thoughts about the debt limit discussion and how it may impact or change what is happening in the world that you're working with?
So, it's really interesting, and it was just mentioned. This idea of business owners wanting to have certainty, right? And being able to have certainty to effectively and efficiently plan strategically for the future and set those milestones, those goals, be able to figure out what's needed and what's not. And that the biggest thing there, and it's 100% right. The biggest thing though is, what have we learned over the past 15, 20, 25, 30 years, right? What happens cyclically, right? From an economic perspective, right? Volatility, that's just, that is the nature of the beast that all of us have to embrace. So then it goes back to, okay, so if certainty on a regular basis is not something that we can 110% achieve, what do we have to start doing? And this is where embracing that ambiguity, right, which is very, very difficult for the brain to do, right? Because, and this is something that the folks over at CEOE talk about quite a bit. The brain will always interpret ambiguity as danger. You can make the choice, right, not to view it as danger, but view it as an opportunity for other possibilities, right? So being able to have that from a conditioning perspective, I mean, look, I agree with you both in the sense of cooler heads prevail. And I think it will work itself out. But it's amazing to watch the knee-jerk reactions, the jolting that takes place, the overreaction, right? And everyone knows that the market's driven from an emotional perspective, right? And what happens there is going to have a huge influence to the group psychology across the board. But if you can stay cool and understand that it is an up and down, ebb and flow, up and down, ebb and flow, right? And it will work itself out at some point. That will give you the capacity to breathe and embrace what's happening, to make the most of it, to leverage the opportunities to your advantage.
You've hit some great points here, and I see some other eyebrows going up with my panelists, and their brain is turning here. Do Pete or Denise, anything that any of your other panelists have just said that you want to comment on or talk about here, kind of in the same vein? Okay, feeling comfortable with that. I agree. Uncertainty is a real issue, and along that vein, as we kind of wander along our path here, one of the things that happens anytime you have a pressure point is that other alternatives emerge. And of course, you're going to have a lot of business owners with these rising rates have to punt. They'll go to the SBA, they'll go to their bankers, and they won't be having conversations that necessarily work the way they want. What role does other alternative lending, and I realize that everyone sitting on the panel is not a specialist in this, but from your perspective, what role will other alternative lending have in this conversation over this next 12 to 18 months as business owners are scrambling in some ways? They've been kind of lulled into an easy world over the last 3 to 5 years as to what's happening with being able to get money and the cost of money. Any comments?
I'll jump in. There's an organization called the NPLA, the National Private Lenders Association. And as a market, private lending used to be, they tried to put the quotes around that because it used to be considered, and everybody would just refer to it as hard money lenders. But there's a private lending community out there that does exist and has become a little more professional, I would say, over the past 10 to 20 years. So to the extent that you have, exhausted your resources with banks, or for whatever reason aren't a good candidate for bank or the traditional markets, that's an avenue to explore. Always friends and family, but be careful. We deal with a lot of family business topics in this group, and so I'm sure we have probably some horror stories to share about family lending experiences. But I would say, to the extent that you are feeling like you're out of options, there are some other alternatives like that, like the Private Lenders Association, and maybe just some individuals who, frankly, have excess cash that were wanting to stay out of this crazy volatile market and would be willing to make a loan, probably supported by collateral, where a bank might not be willing to make such a loan. So don't fret, but network to see if those opportunities might shake themselves out for you.
I think that most business owners typically reach out to their banker. In uncertain times, as we were just talking about uncertainty, traditional banks, large banks, medium regional banks, even community banks will start to tighten their credit box, and they're nimble to approvability. Banks are not, your local community bank that's on the corner is not the only option. Small business administration loans, which are done by a bank, can be very different. Remember, the SBA doesn't approve the loan. The SBA approves the eligibility. The bank approves the loan. There's nothing wrong with looking at a national lender. I just closed a loan 3 weeks ago. The borrower went to Truist. 4 months later, they were declined. I was able to get the loan approved in about 3 weeks and get it closed in 30 days. Just because your bank says no doesn't mean that there might not be an alternative lender that could come in that's not interested in the banking relationship, the merchant accounts, etc. There's different loan programs out there, and banks all are different. Not every bank does everything the same. You have to interview your lender. Do you like this kind of loan? Do you like expansion loans? Do you like capital or equipment loans? Some of them just don't want to do it, but doesn't mean there's not another one that won't. And then again, there's those alternative sites. If anything, I would say in uncertain times, it is the most important time for you to really, truly review as a business owner those loan terms and absorb how it will affect your business. Sometimes I see borrowers so passionate about getting the money, they will sign on anything, not realizing what they're signing.
Right.
So please read everything. Because if you're going to 17 lenders, there's got to be a reason. And maybe borrowing that money might not be the best.
I have a quick anecdote to piggyback on that, Denise. We buy commercial loans, and obviously the opportunity for us is to find some sort of issue or default and be able to force the payout quicker. To your point about making sure you understand the terms of your current loans, if you do go, for example, to a private lender or even another bank, and you say, I need to get this money, I need it now. I'll give you a second mortgage on it. Whoops. Your first lender documents may not have allowed that. Now you've just defaulted. We get to lick our chops, but you're in trouble. So yeah, be sure you're reading and understanding all the covenants in your current debt, documents, and talk to your lender if you don't understand them. I'll turn it over to Gino. I'm sure you have something to say.
No, I think of the common principle here, right? I mean, and it's something that we run into every single day. It's just the importance of taking the time to have strong and robust communication within your team and with those who are feeding and pouring into your team, right? It sounds silly, right? But I cannot tell you how many times throughout the years, right, of in the seat that I'm currently in and other executive roles and ownership roles, you get into this grind and you just assume, right? And no, this is what's going to happen. That's how it's going to work. And goodness gracious, it does not work out that way many a time, right? And we have to learn the hard way, right? So to take a step back, communicate, talk to your bankers, to your point. I mean, you interview, get to know what does the process look like? Are they proactive in making sure I know certain things that could turn around and bite us, right? That we may not be aware of because we're just not privy to, or is it, let's speed through the process, right? I mean, there's so many elements that go into that. And I do think the most important thing there is giving yourself the time to think and communicate clearly and thoroughly with every major decision like that, especially when it comes to your capital, which is obviously a massive stressor and pain point for every single person that is in that position, in that seat. They're there for a reason, right? So I think that's an important thing to recognize.
Well, as we're coming towards the end of our hour here, I have dozens of more questions that I could be asking, and once we turn off our recording, we're going to be able to talk going on from there. But I really want to ask the question that I like to ask anytime we're having a conversation with anyone, if it's among peers or with clients, and that is there anything that you had hoped that we would touch on or talk about today in relationship to the current environment where rates are rising and entrepreneurs and business owners need to figure out how to get capital, how to deploy capital, what their strategies are going to be? Is there anything that you'd like to say in the next 3 to 5 minutes that will wrap up what your perspective was, if there's something that you learned today, or what you want to leave our audience with?
You know,
I would
one of
say
the
it's down to,
go ahead, Denise,
go ahead.
please go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
I would say for business owners, it's down to affordability and connecting yourself with the proper individual who's going to explain it to you, not just to take it and do a loan and make you happy, but it's about, do you really want this? Is really this the right fit for you? I would rather turn away a borrower than to put them in the wrong product and make their life miserable 3 years later. Do they truly understand what the ramifications are long term for whatever the process is that they're trying to go down? Don't just go to somebody that's going to take it and run, because I have clients like that come back to me. So don't be in a rush. Take your time, read the paperwork, get a second opinion, engage somebody that is explaining how this will affect your business long term. That's the best way to deal with the rise of any capital, the low, any opportunity. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, it should be standard.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Denise. You know, one of the things for me from a closing perspective is, you know, we have focused a great deal in our discussion today on capital within itself, right? And kind of what it means, how it's working, how to manage it, optimize it. But when we start talking about social capital, right, and this goes to the networking comment, right, and the types of relationships, and then also what you just said from an advisory perspective, Denise, you know, we can have plenty of advisors that help us from a hard dollars and cents perspective, but having the right advisors to help us with the social side, the people side, to help us make the right decisions with who we are bringing into our circle, because everyone knows all it takes is one bad apple. That's it, right? And it can cause a tremendous domino effect of issues for you. But having the investment of the right person who is an expert in that particular field be alongside you and help kind of see the forest through the trees and paint that picture where it can save you lots of heartache down the line, and also help increase the value of your social connections, which it's funny how that works, right? Because you start aligning yourself with the right people that share the same types of values, and their network opens up, and then their network opens up. And now you start having a pool of folks that know how to do good business, and they have good intentions, right? And that they're very profound and thorough in their approach. So I'd say that would be the biggest thing is, you know, absolutely have the right team of advisors on the capital side, but also really focus and understand the importance and power of people in your capital management. That is massive. And folks that you have on your team that are adaptable and understand and are willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill that mission, whatever you're seeking to achieve or accomplish, those are the folks that you want in your camp, not folks that are the quick fly by night.
Pete, do you have any parting comments?
No, I think Gino's ending is on point, spot on.
Perfect. All right. With that, I want to thank everyone who took time to watch this, even if they're watching this recorded in the future, off our website at www.btctampa.com. Or if you're live today, we are going to end the recording now, and then we're going to stay on for a few minutes. And those of you who have other appointments are free to go. If you want to stay and chat with any of our panelists or anyone else, so we're going to open this up so we can see everyone. and we can talk from there. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.